We need to have a serious conversation about the planned obsolescence tax you are currently paying without even realizing it. The modern computing landscape is effectively a fragmented SaaS ecosystem designed to bleed your hardware dry. Every year, operating system updates become more bloated, adding layers of telemetry and background processes that serve the manufacturer's data mining interests rather than your productivity. Your once powerful laptop hasn't actually slowed down in terms of raw clock speed. It's just being choked by a cloud architecture that treats your local resources as an afterthought. We are living in an era where a simple web browser consumes more RAM than an entire enterprise-grade database did a decade ago. This is a market failure, plain and simple. Companies want you to believe that your 4-year-old machine is e-waste so they can keep their recurring revenue cycles spinning. But if you understand the underlying kernel mechanics, you can bypass this digital churn rate entirely. Today, we are going to perform a total audit of your hardware potential. We are moving away from the predatory bloat of standard consumer OSs and toward hyper-efficient, light environments. We are going to reclaim your liquidity, stop the hardware bleed, and turn that sluggish brick on your desk into a high-performance workstation. But before we dive into the first solution, you need to understand that the wrong choice here could lead to a total loss of legacy data. So listen closely to the configuration steps. The reason Tiny11 exists is to solve the ultimate bottleneck: Microsoft's obsession with enterprise-grade security hardware that most people simply don't have. Windows 11 is a fantastic OS, buried under a mountain of telemetry, pre-installed promotional apps, and the dreaded TPM 2.0 check. Tiny11 is the surgical response to this bloat, stripped down by the developer NTDEV to be the leanest possible version of the NT kernel. It exists because the market demanded a way to run modern .exe applications without the 4 GB RAM tax that comes with a standard installation. When you first boot into Tiny11, the interface feels eerily clean. You'll click the Start button, and instead of a wall of TikTok and Disney Plus icons, you'll see only the essentials: File Explorer, Settings, and the terminal. The setup process involves downloading the ISO and using a tool like Rufus to flash it to a USB drive. During the install, you'll notice the lack of the "Your PC doesn't meet minimum requirements" screen, which is a breath of fresh air for anyone with an older Intel chip. Let's look at the math of the matter, because the numbers here are staggering. A standard Windows 11 home install will idle at roughly 3.5 to 4 GB of RAM usage due to background services and indexing. Tiny11, in its 2026 iteration, idles at approximately 1.2 GB. That is a 70% reduction in idle memory pressure. In financial terms, if you were to upgrade a laptop from 8 GB to 16 GB of RAM to handle standard Windows, you're looking at a $50 to $80 hardware cost. Tiny11 gives you that performance overhead for free, effectively performing a digital memory upgrade through software optimization alone. Imagine an edge case scenario where you're in a remote location with a laptop from 2017. You need to run a specific piece of legacy accounting software that only exists as a Windows executable. A standard OS update would likely trigger a boot loop or thermal throttling, but Tiny11 keeps the CPU cycles focused entirely on your application logic rather than background reporting. For the power users, the hidden shortcut here involves the Windows Package Manager, or winget. Since Tiny11 doesn't come with a browser, you open the terminal, type winget install Chrome or winget install Firefox, and you bypass the entire Microsoft Store ecosystem in one go. However, I have to be brutally honest with you. Because this is a third-party modification, you aren't getting the automated, foolproof update cycle of a standard PC. If you aren't comfortable manually managing your security patches occasionally, this might feel like a high-maintenance relationship. If Tiny11 is for the Windows loyalist, Linux Lite is the bridge for the user who is tired of the Windows ecosystem but fears the Linux learning curve. It solves the problem of fragmented desktop environments that often make Linux feel alien to the average office worker. The goal here is a zero-friction migration path for businesses and individuals who want to escape the recurring license fees of the Windows world. When you navigate the Linux Lite 7.x interface, it feels like a refined version of Windows 7. The taskbar is at the bottom, the start menu is in the bottom left, and the system tray houses your familiar volume and network icons. Setting it up is a matter of a few clicks and a graphical installer that handles partition resizing automatically, which is a lifesaver for those worried about wiping their drives. You'll spend most of your time in the Lite Software Center, which uses a simple check-the-box interface to install apps. Let's talk about the math. Linux Lite is built on the Ubuntu 24.04 long-term support foundation. This means you are getting enterprise-grade security updates until at least 2029, and potentially 2034 with extended support. In a corporate environment with 50 legacy laptops, switching to Linux Lite saves roughly $100 per seat in OS licensing fees. That is $5,000 in immediate capital retention just by switching the kernel. The system requirements are minimal. A 1 GHz processor and 1 GB of RAM are all you need for a functional machine. Consider a high-stakes edge case. Your primary workstation dies, and you have to use a 12-year-old laptop to join a crucial video conference. While Windows would spend 20 minutes installing updates, Linux Lite boots in 15 seconds and recognizes your legacy webcam instantly thanks to its updated driver stack. The power user workflow here involves the Lite Tweaks tool. Most users just use it for cleaning cache, but you can use it to preload frequently used applications into memory. This reduces the startup time of heavy apps like LibreOffice to nearly zero, giving an old mechanical hard drive the perceived speed of an SSD. But here is the anti-pitch. The default icon set looks a bit dated, almost like a time capsule from 2012. If you care about modern aesthetics and rounded corners, you're going to have to spend an hour in the settings menu skinning the interface to make it look like something from this decade. ChromeOS Flex is Google's strategic play to dominate the refurbished hardware market. It solves the problem of the browser-only user, who is currently using a bulky OS to only ever open a single tab. It effectively turns any aging x86 laptop into a streamlined Chromebook, removing the overhead of a local file system and focusing entirely on cloud architecture. The interface is the definition of minimalism. You have a shelf at the bottom with your pinned apps, and a search button that functions as an app drawer. Setup is unique. You don't even need to install it to the hard drive initially. You can run the entire OS from a USB stick to test compatibility, which is a massive win for risk-averse users. When you do install it, the process takes less than 5 minutes because the footprint is so small. The math of the matter is centered on energy efficiency and uptime. Because there are virtually no background services, users typically report a 15 to 20% increase in battery life compared to Windows. For a freelance consultant, that extra hour of battery life in an airport can be the difference between hitting a deadline or losing a client. Furthermore, the deployment cost for a school or small business is nearly zero, as Google provides the management console for a fraction of the cost of a Windows AD environment. Think about an edge case scenario involving a security breach. If a legacy Windows machine is hit by ransomware, the recovery time can be days. With ChromeOS Flex, your data is synced to the cloud. You simply power wash the device, sign back in, and you are at 100% productivity in under 10 minutes. The power user move here is enabling the Linux development environment within the settings. This allows you to run full desktop Linux apps like GIMP or Visual Studio Code inside a container. It bridges the gap between a simple web player and a professional development machine. But here is the massive caveat. You cannot run .exe files at all. If your workflow relies on a specific piece of local software that isn't web-based, ChromeOS Flex will be a beautiful, fast, and completely useless brick for you. Zorin OS 18 Lite is often called the most beautiful Linux distribution, and for good reason. It solves the aesthetic ugliness that often plagues light operating systems. Usually, light means stripped down and ugly. But Zorin proves that you can have modern design language without sacrificing CPU cycles. The walkthrough of the Zorin interface is where the magic happens. The Zorin look changer is the centerpiece. With one click, the entire desktop layout shifts. Want it to look like Windows 10? Click. Want it to feel like a classic macOS environment with a centered dock? Click. The transitions are fluid, and the transparency effects are handled by a lightweight compositor that doesn't trigger the cooling fans on an old Intel Core 2 Duo. The math here is about the total cost of ownership and productivity. While other systems might be faster by a few milliseconds, Zorin reduces the cognitive load of switching systems. The time saved in training a team to use a new OS is a hidden financial metric. If it takes an employee 5 hours to learn a new system at $30 an hour, that's a $150 hidden tax. Zorin eliminates this because it mimics what they already know. It runs comfortably on 2 gigabytes of RAM, which is the sweet spot for laptops from the mid-2000s. In an edge case scenario, imagine you are giving a presentation and the HDMI scaling on your old laptop is failing. Zorin has an incredibly robust display manager that handles high DPI scaling and external monitors better than almost any other Lite OS. The power user workflow involves Zorin Connect, based on GS Connect. It allows you to sync your Android phone to your laptop, sharing the clipboard, files, and even using your phone as a remote touchpad. It's a level of ecosystem integration you usually only find in the Apple walled garden, but here it is running on a 10-year-old ThinkPad. The anti-pitch? Some of the best Pro layouts are locked behind a $39 paywall. While the Lite version is free, you might feel a bit of feature envy seeing the premium layouts, which is a clever but slightly annoying bit of upselling. Lubuntu is the speed demon of the group, focusing on the LXQT desktop environment. It exists to solve the problem of resource friction. Every animation, every shadow, and every rounded corner in a modern OS uses a tiny bit of GPU and CPU power. Lubuntu strips all of that away in favor of raw execution speed. Walking through the Lubuntu interface is like stepping into a high-performance, minimalist workshop. The menus are snappy, the windows snap into place instantly, and there is zero input lag, even on processors that are struggling with modern web content. The installer is the Calamares framework, which is straightforward and avoids any confusing technical jargon. Let's look at the math, because this is where Lubuntu shines. Upon a fresh boot, Lubuntu 2026 uses roughly 400 to 500 megabytes of RAM. Compare that to the 4,000 megabytes of a standard Windows install. You are reclaiming nearly 3.5 gigabytes of workspace. In a world of cloud-based containers, that's enough overhead to run a Docker instance or a heavy IDE on hardware that should theoretically be in a museum. You are looking at a massive reduction in churn rate for your hardware. You can easily extend the life of a laptop by another 5 years. Consider an edge case. You're a developer working in a specialized Linux container, and you need every single clock cycle for compiling code. Lubuntu stays out of the way, giving your compiler direct access to the metal without the kernel interrupting for user experience tasks. The power user secret in Lubuntu is the PCMan FM-Qt file manager. It's incredibly lightweight, but it allows for root-level terminal access directly from the right-click menu. You can navigate complex server directories and execute scripts without ever having to manually type out long paths in the terminal. The anti-pitch. Lubuntu is functional in the most brutal sense of the word. It is not pretty. The default wallpaper and icon set feel like they were designed by an engineer who hasn't seen a sunset in 3 years. If you need your OS to look like a piece of art, you will be disappointed. Bodhi Linux is the Feinschmecker choice, the connoisseur's pick for extreme hardware recovery. It solves the problem of the truly ancient machine, those netbooks or laptops with 1 gigabyte of RAM or less that other Lite systems have given up on. It uses the Moksha desktop, a fork of enlightenment, which is a unique graphical environment that doesn't follow the rules of Windows or Mac. The interface walkthrough is a bit of a trip. Instead of a traditional start menu, you might have a shelf that can be placed anywhere, and a menu that appears anywhere you left-click on the desktop. It's a modular philosophy. You only load the modules you need. If you don't need a battery monitor, you unload the module, and those few kilobytes of RAM are returned to the system. The math of Bodhi is the most impressive in the category. It can idle at a shocking 250 megabytes of RAM. This allows a laptop from 2008 to actually browse the modern web, provided you use a Lite browser. The hidden tax it removes is the need for an SSD upgrade. While an SSD helps, Bodhi is so light on disk I/O that even an old 5,400 RPM mechanical drive feels usable. In a high-stakes scenario, imagine you need to access a decentralized finance platform or a crypto wallet on a clean machine for security purposes. Bodhi allows you to turn a cheap $20 used laptop into a dedicated, secure terminal that isn't weighed down by the vulnerabilities of a massive OS. The power user workflow involves the Everything module. It's a launcher that indexes not just apps, but every single setting and file in the system. With a few keystrokes, you can jump from a terminal to a specific line in a configuration file without ever touching a mouse. The anti-pitch. The learning curve is a vertical cliff. Because Moksha doesn't work like Windows, you will spend the first 3 days feeling lost. It's a system for people who enjoy tinkering. If you just want to get to work, the unconventional layout might frustrate you to the point of quitting. Finally, we have Puppy Linux, the ultimate Swiss Army knife of operating systems. It solves the problem of the dead hard drive. Most operating systems require a functional internal drive to run, but Puppy is designed to run entirely in RAM. This means it loads the entire OS into your memory at boot, and after that, the disk speed doesn't matter anymore. The walkthrough is unique because the setup happens at the end of the session. You boot from a USB, do your work, and when you shut down, it asks if you want to save your changes to a save file. The interface is intentionally old school, using the JWM, which is fast but very utilitarian. The math here is all about API response times and latency. Because the OS is running in RAM, the speed of opening an application is limited only by your memory's bandwidth, not your drive's seek time. We are talking about near instantaneous application launches. If you're doing high-frequency data entry or managing merchant processing through a web portal, the lack of system-induced lag is a massive productivity boost. It's the difference between a 200 millisecond delay and a 2 millisecond delay on every click. An edge case for Puppy Linux? Forensic data recovery. If a laptop's Windows partition is corrupted and the drive is physically failing, you can boot Puppy Linux, mount the drive in read-only mode, and siphon off your critical financial documents to a cloud drive or another USB stick. It has saved countless businesses from total data churn. The power user move is the Remaster tool. Once you have Puppy configured exactly how you like it, with your specific VPNs, browsers, and scripts, you can click Remaster, and it will create a brand new custom ISO of your specific setup. You can then deploy this custom enterprise-grade Lite OS to any other machine in minutes. But here is the anti-pitch. It's ugly. It's really, really ugly. It looks like a computer screen from a 1995 hacker movie. Also, because it runs as root by default, it's not the most secure environment for browsing the dark corners of the web unless you know exactly what you're doing with the firewall settings. We have covered the spectrum from the Windows-adjacent Tiny 11 to the radical efficiency of Puppy Linux. The reality is that your slow laptop is likely a victim of software bureaucracy. By choosing one of these paths, you are making a conscious decision to opt out of the planned obsolescence economy. You are reclaiming your hardware liquidity and ensuring that your tools serve your bottom line, not the quarterly earnings of a software giant. But before you start the flash process, there is one final caveat. Always, and I mean always, verify your driver compatibility for your specific Wi-Fi card. There is nothing that ruins a productivity flow faster than a Lite OS that can't connect to the cloud architecture it was meant to access. Check the forums, download the ISO, and take back control of your silicon. The hidden tax of slow computing ends today.